We're here at the police and fire station on Lothrop Street, and we are going to take a tour of the facilities today. We have our police chief, fire chief, and representative from Castle Booze here with us. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
I'm Keith Boone. I'm the Easton police chief.
I'm Justin Alexander, Easton's fire chief.
And I'm Greg Joynt, the architect with Castle Booze Associates, the architect for the project, overseeing both the public safety and DPW portions of the project for the town.
Okay, so I think we're going to start with the police station. Just as a little background, this station was built in 1969, renovated a little bit in 1990. So I think in 1969, Easton's population was about 10,000.
Correct.
Okay, or 16,000. No, 10,000. It was about 10,000. Our population now is 25,000.
Correct.
So maybe as we walk through, you guys can explain to us kind of the challenges of, over a doubled population and how you're trying to meet those needs. So we'll go with you.
Okay.
And start back here.
So where we are now is we're coming off the lobby of the police station. This is where if we were having someone come in, whether it was a victim of a crime or a citizen having an issue that we were trying to help resolve any type of a problem with, we would come in through this door here off the lobby and we would use this interview room. Now, as you can see, the layout of the building, we have our dispatch area and we have our patrol room. So it is quite noisy in here because we have shift change and we have really people coming in and out of this area. So it doesn't make for a good use of the space if someone is having a vulnerable situation that they want some privacy with or some confidentiality with. So that's one challenge just here, even meeting a simple conversation with a member of the community that we do have. As we come through here, this is the administrative wing of the building. We do have an office for our court prosecutor, and this is the office for a shared office for our primary records officer, a firearms license officer, and our animal control officer. We've now run out of room for animal control needs, and we've had to add a desk into this area. So as you can see, we've run out of space really everywhere with our filing cabinets, and we're at the point now where we're stacking things in tubs and on the floor and really just trying to keep a chaotic situation more organized. This is our primary supervisor's office. Again, we have at one time typically 2 to 3 supervisors in here, but 6 share the office. As you can see, completely overrun with training records, equipment, and again, to ask our officers or our supervisors to use this small space, it's becoming very difficult for them to manage a shift when they're in this type of environment. So as we make our way down the wing of the police station, this is really our only closet for stationary needs. It's adequate in size, but as you can see, it's become a place where we just put things that we have no other use for. Chairs and old pieces of equipment that we have to hold on to for records retention purposes. This is our primary interview room. So again, if we have a victim of a crime or some type of sensitive situation that we're meeting with a member of our community to have a conversation with or help them with some type of issue, again, we're walking them. It's very small. It's a claustrophobic type of room. And if you recognize the layout of the building, we're now walking people who are here for help. We're walking them past our records officer, past our animal control officer, past our firearms licensing officer to get to a room of confidentiality, and it doesn't help us in that regard. So this is our detective's office, and we have 4 detectives assigned to this area, and as you can see, they've run out of room here for their investigative reports and their intel. We host meetings with area communities if we're having a dual investigation, and other than that table that only hosts 2 chairs, we've now run out of room for them to have a private confidential meeting in here. So this is a definite issue that we're we've been seeing for several years in the police department.
So back in the day, you didn't have 4 detectives, I'm sure.
In 1968, I believe there was 1 detective.
Okay, so
So
just
we've
it's
evolved.
increased.
Correct. As the town's grown and as we've grown as an agency, the needs of the community have changed. So we've increased our units where now we're up to 4 detectives. We have probably another 15 officers that have been added to the roster. So we've really just outgrown the building. In the building we're in now, this portion was an add-on. This was an add-on of the 1990 renovation. So, and we're into 32 years of that renovation. This is the office of the executive officer right here. Our accreditation manager right now is working on some accreditation folders. But this really, as you can see, other than our filing cabinets, we are now stacking tubs that we have regularly buying from WB Mason to store our records in and keep them secured in these offices. So again, unless it's just continually buying filing cabinets, we don't have any other room to safeguard these records. So this is the end of the building of the administrative wing. This is the administrative clerk's office. And as you can see, she has run out of room, and now she is storing her personnel records and training records that we are mandated to retain on the floor. We've just run out of room on where to put things, and this didn't happen yesterday. This has been probably a 10 to 15 year problem where we've just run out of space and we're now just stacking tubs on top of tubs of records.
So some records you have to keep, like, you know, I'm thinking, can't you just go through it, clean it out, throw it away? You can't.
So we
Records you
can't,
have to
yeah, there is a records retention schedule that we have to follow through the Commonwealth. And without getting too into the weeds on what we have to retain for certain amounts of time, we really have to keep everything. There is a 7-year window on some crash reports that we can get permission from the custodian of public records and destroy, but for the most part, we have to retain all of this. So we can't just shred it. It has to be retained.
So more people, more population, more incidents, more records.
Correct.
And
Everything's
nowhere to put
growing
it.
except the
Everything's-
building.
Okay.
This is my office, the chief's office. It's a good size. I have no complaints about the size of this office. The one downfall is I can really only have a small supervisory meeting here. This is really the only private area where I can meet with command staff and have a private conversation about operations. So that's a challenge for me, but I work through it the best I can. And by that measure, I do utilize this conference room to host bigger meetings. But unfortunately, this room has turned into spillover for equipment. During the height of COVID, as you can see, we have some gloves and masks here. This entire room was backlog of our COVID supplies. We just cleaned this out literally in the last week only because we are preparing for our accreditation assessment. And this is where a team of assessors from around the state will be coming in and reviewing our files. So once this room is done, this will turn back into a makeshift equipment storage area for the department. The only other closet that we have, which is the chief's area, conference room. And this is, again, we have shelves. There are records here, annual town reports that I'm required to hold on to as prior chiefs were. So things don't get thrown out, they just get stored. So eventually, when I get another delivery of stationery products, whether it be paper or pens or markers, they get stacked up here on the floor because we just don't have anywhere else to put anything. So as we turn the corner here, this is our evidence and property room. And as you can see, our property officer is in here doing some work.
Hi. How are you?
This is Detective Wilson, who's doing work right now. So this is our property room, and similar to our records retention issue, we can't just throw property away. Anything that's been recovered from the police department, really since the inception of our department, we're required to retain evidence for a certain amount of time, sometimes forever. There's property in this room that's been here since prior to me being born, and it will be here probably after I'm not here anymore. We're required to keep all of this, and it's very difficult as our cases get more complicated our evidence just gets bigger and bigger, and this room we've completely outgrown this room. You'll hear me say a few more times, we're an accredited department. One of our
What
standards.
does that mean, if you're an accredited department? What does that mean?
So, as an accredited agency, we're bound to a set of policies and guidelines that ensure best practice. And so we've been accredited since 2011. Every 3 years, the assessors come back in and review our practices and our policies. We actually have one coming up in a month, so we're preparing for that on-site assessment, but the evidence room is always an issue because they see this could lead to mistakes, this could lead to disorganization, and that's why we have that standard of accreditation. So this is our safe, which is part of our property room, but we have to keep high-value items in here and any weapons that we take. So I'm not going to open this because I don't even have the combination, but this is completely full, and we've run out of room in here as well. And the other issue is, if you've noticed, we have no sprinkler systems in the building. Because of the date of the building, we weren't required to have that type of fire suppression equipment, and if we ever ran into an issue where a fire came, we could lose valuable years of investigations could be destroyed. So that's a concern for me as the new chief, that our property and evidence is very important to me. And as we continue down, you'll see a common theme with our records. This is the police department's central records area, and you'll see that we've run out of room and we've just added cabinet after cabinet after cabinet. And this goes back to several of the records that I mentioned we can't throw out. We have to retain these, most for the life of the record of the police department. Some we can purge after 10 to 15 years, but that's an ongoing basis. But when we do purge, things from the floor go right back into the cabinet, so we never actually create any space. This is our IT room, which I think is interesting for people to notice. This serves as the hub of all town servers, and clearly we have outgrown this room as well. So all of the town servers are all connected and they stay in this room because we're a 24/7 operation. We can troubleshoot if we have to, but DPW, water, town hall, fire, police, council on aging, everything runs through here. So if there's ever a problem in this room or a fire suppression issue, we're now could really be shutting down the town for internet service. So having a better setup that's more logical than this is something we would desperately need in a new building. And we are now entering our garage area. So as you can see, we have really used up all the space that we possibly can between our police vehicles, our mountain bikes, our speed sign, and in fact, our animal control officer has nowhere to put her temporary kennels, so they end up on the floor in our garage. So anytime we have a minor cruiser issue that has to get dealt with here, or more likely if we have to impound a vehicle, for example at a car crash with significant injury and we're required to impound the vehicle for inspection from the state, this is where it would stay, and then this garage is shut down. Because of the integrity of the investigation, we added a camera to keep an eye on the property, but we can't use the garage anymore, and if we've impounded a vehicle in the past, it could be 2 months sitting in here. So we've essentially just lost the access to the garage. The other problem is, this is the generator that powers the police and fire department during a power failure. And as you can see, this is the only access to it. So it is secured, which is an accreditation standard, but we have to physically walk out an employee of National Grid to come out here and do an inspection. As you can see, this is quite an outdated generator as well. And so we're constantly having maintenance issues with this. Again, that is an accreditation standard to ensure that we're constantly having this maintained annually. So in case we do lose power at the police station or the fire station, we are up and running.
So is the maintenance issue finding parts because it's outdated, or just it's old and breaks, or?
It is.
Both.
We're fortunate that our DPW has staff that can maintain this, but we are required to call in an outside vendor, which is FM Generated, to actually inspect it every year. So it's outdated. So it's starting to become an issue with parts and things like that. Clearly, this wouldn't be inside the building at a new facility, so that the problems with allowing access to this would go away. Another area in here, which is this is a locked area, is spillover from our property and storage. And if you look at some of the dates, this has become part 2 of Central Records, and these are daily logs beginning in 1938.
And you have to keep those.
And we have to keep these daily logs forever. So this is now a secondary Central Records area, as well as if we ever have abandoned or found or stolen property that is inappropriate to put inside the building in the property room, it finds its way here. And so as you can see, we've just added tables and tubs to just continually add to our records.
So storage seems to be a big issue.
Correct.
So if you had a newer facility, what would change?
Well, I think in talking with the building designer that we've been speaking with, one of the things that we would like to see would be a Central Records area that is not only adequate for what we have, but for future use. So they take into consideration where will the department be in 50 years from now. And as you can see, 50 years ago, this is where we were. Again, a lot of our records are electronic, but we're required to keep paper documents of everything. So that problem's never going to end unless something changes in the legislature that allows us to electronically store records. But then that comes with data challenges as well, and data is very expensive. So I don't see this problem ever going away. So that's why we're hoping for a better building with better access to these things. So now we're entering back through our Central Records corridor. We're coming down the back part of the police station building. This is our locker area. Do you want to go in and see the locker room? I just need to knock and see if anyone's in here. Hello, anyone in here? Okay. Okay. So as you can see, this is the men's locker room facility. One thing I would like to point out is the buckling of the floor. We have had constant sewer issues where we're constantly relying on the DPW and doing work orders to correct this old plumbing. It's an ongoing problem at least 4 to 5 times a year, and as you can see, we just keep repairing these things. So where we are is in our holding facility, our cell block. And this is our female part of the building. We have 2 cells and we have our property lockers. And this area right here is our processing area for our breath test machine and our fingerprint machine. So we would bring somebody in through this garage door, which is called the Sally Port, and we would walk them through into our booking area where they would be processed here electronically, and then they would be walked back over to where they came in from to take a breath test possibly and do our fingerprinting, and then they would find their way into a female cell, a male cell. As you can see, it's not ideal. We have to process everyone right here in this room. We've added cameras to ensure officer safety and to document everything for court purposes. It's just inappropriate how this building part of the cell block is set up, where it leads to problems with intoxication, for example. Our ventilation system is not adequate for this area, for this part of the building. And so anything that's going on in here will be sent through the return vent and filtered throughout the building. So if we did have somebody in here that's intoxicated, we can smell it down my end of the building. So that's a problem too. The ventilation system is completely inadequate. If we ever had somebody that had any type of narcotics on them, and today we're dealing with fentanyl a lot, any of that could get sucked into the filtration system and pass around the building. So it is an officer safety issue as well that it does concern me.
What if you have multiple people
And if we
coming in
have,
at the same?
Correct.
What do you do?
So if we have multiple prisoners, we would actually be booking one. We would have someone secured in the cell, and we would just play the merry-go-round game. And when one's done, we would secure another and take the other one out. We do host as a secondary option for Stonehill College. So if they don't have a cell block, if they ever have the needs to come over here, we could have to keep people in the car until they're processed, or again, just fill our cells while we rotate through to get everybody processed. So it's not ideal.
So what would be ideal? Like what would be different in a new built besides ventilation, obviously?
Well, the ventilation, I think just the overall layout of the building, and maybe Greg could talk about that too, in the newer buildings with wash stations and decontamination areas, and just safeguarding the prisoners too. We have an obligation to keep them safe as well. So I don't know if you'd like to talk about some of the new innovations in the cells.
Yeah, so modern cell blocks generally have a progression in through for detainees where they come from a sally port, go through a processing area where they can be initially processed and held there for their safety and officer safety while they're in processing. So they're not out in a egress path through the detention area. After that, they come into a general processing area, which you saw with the background where the mug shots are taken and things like that. We generally like to put those up on a dais so that the officer has a little bit of a raised position in regards to the prisoner, and has a more institutional form than what you see here, eliminating hand grabs, things on the wall that prisoners could potentially grab onto, hold onto, and cause either themselves harm or officers harm. So it's really about making sure that the processing through into the cell area is clean and organized, so that officers can do each step of the processing effectively and quickly, and get the detainee into a proper holding cell for the duration of their detention. On the other side, Chief, I'd say the processing out for detainees is also an important issue. Once the detainee is able to be released, making sure the officers are able to release that prisoner quickly out to the outside without passing back through the station proper, through report writing, through the main lobby, and able to get them back out to whoever's picking them up, a family member or something like that, without interacting with the entire rest of the building is important.
Yep.
So that brings another question to my mind, because as we're standing here, you said there is a prisoner coming in.
Yeah.
Some people are going to say, this is Easton, maybe it's just a couple you have, but I'm guessing through the years there's been an increase in arrests, an increase in the number of prisoners you have here. Maybe can you speak to that?
Yeah, and there is, and we're certainly not a city environment, but laws have changed, and there are certain things that we're mandated to make arrests for. So things that we may have been able to issue a summons for, or a promise to appear, we now have an influx where we're mandated to actually take people into custody. Domestic violence has been one of those key areas that have changed significantly in the last 10 years. So anything in that realm, we're obligated to shall arrest. So we do have several arrests come through here on a weekly basis. It's hard to put a number on it. I could get stats and if that would help, but there has been an influx since I've worked here, just in the last 20 years, of our detainee processing, for sure. And speaking of detainee processing, as Greg had just mentioned, when someone is released, this is how we would leave, and we're back to where we started in the building. And so this is the report writing area. So again, we have 6 officers assigned to every shift. A minimum of 4 are here. As you can see, if we're busy, we would have to rotate through or find another office for an officer to write a report. This is the only area we have dedicated to them. So if we were releasing a detainee, they're walking by the officers that they just interacted with. If they come up through here, they could be interacting or coming in contact with, again, people seeking help that are walking in from the lobby to have a conversation with an officer. So that's a concern for me. I would like to completely eliminate the chance of that interaction, because we could literally be having a detainee leave as someone's coming in looking for help, and it can make for an uncomfortable situation. It could make the victim hesitant to come in. So that's a major issue with our processing area. And I do want to just sneak back in here to our roll call and training area. And as you can see, this was once the parking lot, because we have the back of the building. So this was part of the addition. And this is the training room for a total of 40 officers that we have, including our civilian staff. And we just can't provide training for everybody at once, which is unfortunate. I regularly have been renting out or reserving rooms at the town hall to use for space. I rely on the DPW to use their large conference room. We just ran out of room. So this is where all of our shift briefing would take place. We've done CPR training in here, and we're on top of each other training in here. If we had a media event where I was giving a press conference, I would be standing here. We've had that before. It's very uncomfortable for the people that are coming in here. It's not very inviting. We can no longer host community meetings because, as you see, we have an arrest coming in right now. We would have to have everybody leave, go to the lobby and wait until everybody was processed and out of this area, then bring them back in. So for several years, we haven't really been able to offer a comfortable meeting environment for the community, which is disappointing. So this area here is our communications room, and being part of SEMREC, we no longer have 911 here, which did free up some space, but we do have an officer permanently assigned to the desk because we're a 24/7 operation. This is used as, like I said, our makeshift secondary office if an officer has to write a report and the patrol officer area is already full. So we have 2 offices here at a time, and at the same time we have people coming in the lobby looking for help. So this area would be nice to have our desk officer separated, so the desk officer can just deal with the window and the telephones and not have the interference of officers trying to prepare reports. And again, not having 911 here helped us because we don't have that system in place anymore. But as we've grown, again, we've just added cabinet after cabinet after cabinet to hold on to these records. And so we're almost out of room in here as well. So this area of the police station, obviously we have our impound lot here. So if we're required again to impound a vehicle for whatever reason that's not required to be safeguarded from the elements in the garage, this is where it would be. But this also houses our trailer for our training unit, our ATV unit, and our radar trailer units. So this can fill up very quickly. It is adequate for what we're doing now, but it would be nice to have partitions and have it separated. And I know in a new facility that's something we would be looking for. The other issue that I did want to bring over is this shed right here actually has equipment stored in it for our animal control officer. We had nowhere else in the building to use, so the town installed a telephone pole and ran power to this shed that was built several years ago, and it holds animal control equipment and a freezer, because during rabies testing she needs to store certain animals in that shed inside of a freezer.
So she works in the shed?
So whether it's today or if it's in the middle of January, we are plowing and shoveling a path so she can get in and out of there, and it's just it's a lot to ask of her as a professional animal control department to be using that. So one thing I would like to see is a complete shift in how we are doing our animal control operations as well.
You know, I hear mostly that you really have outgrown this building. So that begs the question, why not just add on? Sprinkle this building?
So,
change the, ventilation? Can't you do that?
So I suspect anything, any type of renovation, I guess, could be done. I would rely on professional architects to speak on that, but I know we do work orders regularly to have the building repaired. And in my experience, we end up spending more money to replace and fix things than it would be to build a new facility. I know if we were to do renovations, we have to become compliant in areas that I don't even know if this building could actually become
So
compliant
do you
in.
want to maybe
Yeah,
speak
sure.
to that?
Yeah, so obviously, additions and renovations are a potential option on most buildings. This particular building on this site has a number of limitations with the surrounding area and wetlands, with the overall building, overall lot footprint, which is small, and the interior configuration, as we've kind of walked through, is just not adequate for modern police operations. So renovations within this existing footprint would be significant and would have a number of code required upgrades that it would trigger. And when you're dealing with a building that is mostly masonry, those renovations become rather expensive and disruptive. So, you think about renovations, if you think about renovations in your own home, you can maybe displace your kitchen for a month or two, you can maybe displace a bedroom for a month or two, but you can't displace a town's police operations, really. The police don't have any other place to go, and as you've seen, they don't really have any swing space where they could give up an area to be renovated over time. So part of the calculation.
So it's not as simple as just sticking a new wing on
Exactly. And part of that calculation is, what you would have to do temporarily to house policing operations, in addition to just the cost of renovations. So ultimately, this building was not really determined to be a candidate for renovations or additions because of its existing age, the vintage, and other, numerous problems that are existing.
So now we're going to switch over to the fire department side of things, and Chief Alexander is going to kind of walk us through and just kind of explain your day-to-day, what it's
Absolutely.
like in here.
So this is the only connection inside between police and fire, and it joins through the boiler room. So you come on in here and you can see some of our systems, and so as you can see, everything in here is extremely dated, and you come around, you can see the wires and our boilers. There have been attempts to update them over the years, but the building just doesn't sustain them. It's just so old and so difficult. Everything from thermostats that don't actually control what they're supposed to, air conditioning units that are constantly failing, circulator pumps that let go, and pipes that are breaking and leaking. It's a constant problem in this building. Very expensive, and we're very thankful that our DPW is as capable as they are to keep us going, but it occupies a lot of their time.
So the boiler is for you and
In
the
police, yeah. So this room
both.
shares both sides of the building and covers heat. Air conditioning is done through other areas, but mainly heat through here, hot water. We have our air, this is an air compressor for our breathing air tanks that we breathe when we're in a fire, and it's in this room, which isn't really ideal, but it's just the only place we could put it. And then all of our, on this wall you can see all of our, this is what is all of our connection to the world and data, and you can see that was definitely designed in a different era, and we're just trying to make it all work.
So if something happens here, it affects police and fire.
It can, depending on what goes wrong. Exactly.
Goodness.
Yeah. So you just never know. Another problem with this building is asbestos. This building has asbestos in it. It was built before the prohibition on asbestos. So that's another issue of any type of reuse or expansion of this building, is it would have to be remediated. And it's very hard to remediate an existing building that you're going to reuse again. Very expensive. So that's another consideration. And the thing is, back when this building was built, it wasn't just in insulation. It was in floor tiles and carpet glue and window glazing. It was just everywhere. And that's what happens when you
So
go
that
to
would
these
be a
buildings.
huge cost.
It would be a huge
if you
cost.
wanted to renovate.
Exactly.
To
And we would
get
have
rid of all
to
that.
we would have to be out of here and operating the fire department some other way. And there's no other. We have three stations currently, and neither of those would be able to sustain our operation. They're not big enough for us to move into even temporarily, because this is the biggest of the three. So we wouldn't even be able to move out. So it becomes very challenging if we were ever going to try to renovate, which really, I think this shows why it's not an ideal option. So we can carry on, we can go this way. This hallway takes you down through some of the utilities. And again, the same theme as we saw in the police is storage. We just don't have any storage. We're everywhere, and everywhere we can, with filing cabinets, equipment that we have to keep, equipment that we have to keep in reserve in case we need it. And you see it's very tight, very claustrophobic. You come through this space in here, same problem. This is, I don't know what you qualify this as a room, but it is. We built some shelves. Yeah, and this is a gear dryer. When I was done with, one of the problems with our stations is none of them, not just this one, have the ability to properly bring in our fire gear after a fire when it's all contaminated with all the carcinogens. And that's a big problem for the fire service right now, is firefighters getting cancer and dying of cancer. And none of our buildings currently can help us with that. We have no clean areas to wash our gear and separate them from us. And this is a gear dryer, so after we wash our fire gear, we put it on this and it dries our gear, but it's inside this little space. There's humidity issues. It's not a clean area. So it's very challenging for us to keep our gear clean and decontaminated. And you'll see more of that when we come out here. So you see this piece of apparatus carries a lot of our technical equipment, whether it be special air tanks, dive equipment, ice rescue, and this is our cleanest area that we have in the whole station. And we try to keep it as clean as we can because we fill our air tanks here. So this is where we have to get clean air to put in our air tanks that we breathe. So that's in this area. This is our washer and dryer for our gear after a fire. So this is how we extract the carcinogens from it, and then we put it on that gear dryer. And then we have no space to work on our equipment either. So our air packs are very intricate and need a clean space to work on and repair them, and we don't have that. So we're putting them on benches or on back of trucks, and that's not ideal to keep our equipment in tip-top shape and ready to go. And we do our best that we can with the situation, but an industry standard is that it has its own room and a nice clean stainless steel table and an area to work on our very intricate, technical, life-saving gear. This is stuff that we bring in and breathe on a fire. It has to work, and we want to clean it in the best and maintain the best places we can.
Are there mandates for that, or are those just industry standards and
So there's
you hope to reach it?
Yeah, so there's industry standards, and if the fire department, like the police, went down the accreditation road, which is a path I would want to go on, this building would not qualify. And none of our buildings would, but a new facility would, and that would make the process a lot easier. And then if we come through here, so we've mixed in fire gear and storage of other equipment that really isn't on the clean side of it with our fire. So it's just a mix because we just don't have the space to fully separate it. It just doesn't exist in our facilities, and it's unfortunate, and we do the best we can. So we come into here, this is our main apparatus bay. So this is where we keep all the fire trucks. And you can see that it's very tight. Between all of our trucks in here and trying to back them in, the spacing is less than ideal. So it's very challenging to fit our trucks in, and newer trucks are larger. So as we get new apparatus in the future, they're larger, and this apparatus space just can't support the future for the fire department.
But does that limit you if you need a new engine?
Yes.
You have to.
The worst thing you can do is build an engine for a parking space because it never meets your needs.
Okay.
You want to build an engine
But
for your
that's what you
needs.
have to do.
Sometimes you do. You have to build an engine for a space, and I know of many fire departments that's had to do that, and it really limits the capacity of that piece of apparatus. So we're in a position right now we can fill what we have, but the future things are changing, and this was just built in an era of much smaller fire trucks. In 1968. Fire trucks were much, much smaller. They had needed much less equipment. The scope of what the fire service had to do in 1968 is very different than what it has to do now.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Even just COVID. Just dealing with COVID.
yeah.
The amount of equipment we have to carry now on our trucks just because of that one example takes up multiple compartments on our apparatus. Back in the late 60s, having to work at car accidents with jaws of life was relatively new. The jaws of life now take up entire compartments on apparatus, so it makes it much larger. Even just our own gear takes up more space now. Air packs are new now, so they take up more space. Back in the 60s, they weren't as common, so trucks didn't have as many on them. So trucks have just naturally gotten bigger because of the amount of things we have to do. And you can see, what we have already is tight. So we have our hose rack storage. This is for our spare hose. It goes on the wall. That's pretty traditional even in a new station. You have a hose rack on a wall. And then you can see behind you, or over this way, some of our gear rack storage. So that's fire gear. The problem with it is it's out in these trucks. Even though we have these yellow hoses that you can see attached to the truck that collects the exhaust, it's still difficult to maintain a perfectly clean space, and we're getting these diesel particulate carcinogens on our fire gear that we're
And
trying to
then you
keep
put it
clean,
on?
and then we put it on.
Oh.
And then we put it on and wear it. And in a new
That can't be
facility,
healthy.
it's not healthy. And in a new facility, those are in a separate room that's sealed up from the apparatus base, so those things don't get on the gear. So once we get it clean, we keep it as clean as we can, so then we have to wear it. It's always ready to go. An example is we wear what we call a hood. And the hood protects our ears and part of our head in a fire from the heat. And we realized that we're giving ourselves thyroid cancer because it stays so close to our thyroids that because we're getting these toxic chemicals on our gear, whether it's in the
From the
fire
diesel
or
or
from the
from
diesel,
wherever.
and we need to do a better job at keeping our gear clean because we're realizing things like that are happening. Thyroid cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, those are the big cancers in the fire service, and we're trying to do a better job, and the facilities will help us do it. So as we walk our way through these trucks and wind our way through them, we have our workbench in the back. This is our only workbench where we try to fix our equipment. And you can see there's not too much here for us we can do with this type of situation. Normally this would be its own little room in a newer facility, so we can bring a chainsaw or other piece of equipment in and fix it and maintain it, so we're not sending it out to an outside shop at a higher cost to the town. So having a facility is actually a cost savings in the long run. And then along this back wall is our storage racks. This is what we have. This is our only storage for rack storage. And then we have additional, we'll get over to the other side, we'll show you what we did in there.
Okay.
And then while we're back here, I'll show you the outside. So we have more equipment than we have apparatus space. So we have trailers that are outside. Currently our boat's outside due to space limitations. That's a trailer that we had that's ours now for our SAFE program for our students at our open house. And you can see how it's very tight. That's a training prop. We have no training areas. That tall wood thing is an escape prop. So what happens if we have to get out of a building quickly, that's what we train on, and we have no place to keep it except there. So very, very limited.
So if it rains, snows, everything's
Everything's
just sitting
over
out
there. We got to dig it out, and snow blowers, and it's quite a process. So if you look up the modern heating systems, we don't have a modern heating system. They struggle to keep up in the winter to keep the apparatus bay warm, and we open the doors, we lose a massive amount of heat very quickly. They struggle to recover. They don't bring the heat back in quickly. The old cord reels that we use to plug the trucks in, because we have to keep the trucks plugged in for power because they die, because they always have a drawer on them. So we have to keep them plugged in. The modern trucks need an air hose too to keep the air brakes charged up, so when we start the truck, we don't have to wait for the truck to build air to go on a call, because that could take over a minute. And we want to get out the door as quick as possible, so this building wasn't designed for that. So what we've had to do is rig up temporary hoses looped over the things to make it work, because we know we needed it, but this building was not designed for it, and they work, but they're not. We went to Lowe's and bought a contractor's hose and strung it along the ceiling so we can get air in these trucks, and that's where we're at. It gets the job done. We're not going to wait. Nobody's waiting a minute for us to build air, but it's not ideal. You can see that we've combined storage, our snow blower. This is a prop that we use to train on how to force a door open. If we had to get somebody's home and it was on fire, if it's locked, we still have to get in. So we have to train how to get through door locks and practice. And here it is right next to the fire truck and in here, and you're swinging big tools at this prop. We have no place to put it. And this is a very expensive prop. We don't want to just put it outside either. It is very heavy. Yeah, you don't just pick it up. No. So this was a hose tower that we used to hang hose, and you could do type of rope training and different things in here, but we've had to stop using it for that. We were fortunate that our newer hose doesn't have to be dried as much, so we lucked out with that. But we've created storage. What you see in here is our COVID PPE, protective equipment storage. That's what you see here. And our couple ladders that we have as reserve stored. This is the extent of our equipment storage right here. And it's the hose tower. It's a training tower that we no longer can use as that. And then you get a better look at all of our firefighter gear and how it's out in the open. Typically these are individual too, so that one person's gear isn't mixed up with another person's gear because they're custom to the firefighter. But we have firefighters right next to each other without individual spots.
So when the trucks come back in, they're running the diesel, everything's in here. It just gets on
It
these.
just the soot just gets on them. Yeah, you can't even see it. It's microscopic, but it's in the air.
So
It's
a newer facility would have like a separate
Yeah,
room.
so what they do in a new facility is they have a separate room with sealed doors, with rubber seals on the doors so the fumes can't get in, and then they have ventilation that sucks anything in out, so it's a negative pressure. It pulls out the toxins so it doesn't
And
even
you
get
don't
on the
have
gear.
that here.
That's right, we don't have it in any of our stations. This is another multi-purpose room. So this is our fitness facility, so our firefighters can stay in shape and be healthy and be able to, lift somebody over a ladder and do what they have to do because it's a physically demanding job. But at the
It's
same
also
time,
storage.
we're storing our oxygen tanks in here. And this is another facility on how we fill air bottles and tanks. So these are all in one room. And when this turns on, you can't be in here to work out because it's just so loud. You have to wear hearing protection. That's why it's right here. So anytime we have to use this, you can't use it for anything else. So it's definitely, and it's very limited. We have multiple firefighters working, and this is the only space they have. So you almost have to schedule your time in here because it's just not enough room. Yeah. So yeah, you can see. As we point out, how winding through and how tight everything is. One thing I point out is
if you have to work on it like this.
This fire?
Do you have to do it outside? Like how
Yeah,
can you
so
fit
it's really so if you're doing even just regular truck checks, so we check our trucks every day to make sure they're ready to go. Even just opening our doors
Yeah.
goes right over, and if it's not parked perfectly, you hit and you damage the paint. You can't get in and out. So it's very, very tight. So on a winter day, checking these trucks inside is a struggle. We prefer to pull them outside and work on them and do them. And then another limitation of the buildings, all of our buildings, is that the way fire trucks are designed is that if the engine's under here, it's in the middle, the actual engine of the fire engine, and in order to work on it, this whole cab, the whole front, tilts up very high so you can get access to the engine. So if this won't start, you would want to tilt the cab to find out why. The problem is you can't tilt the cab in these low bays, where a new fire station you would.
So you have to go.
You got to grab some chains.
somehow-
You got to hook chains to it and drag it outside in the middle of a blizzard to figure out why it won't start and get maintenance on it. Whereas in a new station, you'd be able to just tilt the cab and have the mechanic come look at it and figure it out. So I've worked in old facilities and I've hooked many a chain to a fire truck to pull it outside. It's definitely not the way you want to do it. But again, we do what we have to do. So this is the bunk area. So the firefighters work at least 24-hour shifts, if not longer in some cases. And the issue is space. So this was originally one room, and there was no gender separation, no independent privacy, no anything. And during COVID even, we were able to make some adjustments to try to prevent that. And we realized during COVID that there was no, you had people supposed to wear masks and stay 6 feet apart, but then when they had their moments to catch some, a little bit of rest in between calls in the middle of the night, they were in the same space. So we were able to make a few adjustments, which was great, but you can see that they're very small, limited accommodations, not what you would typically see. And again, I think it's what we all do. We band together and find a way to make it work for the moment. But it's just very, very limited. And there's one thing about this area is it's not future-proofed. It's already full. So as the town grows, if there's more firefighters, there's just not enough places to put them in here. We've run out of space. It's already maxed out every day. So we have an issue there. So this is our EMS storage. So for our ambulances, this is all we have for our EMS area to store our equipment, records, training equipment. That's it. It's a very small space. I don't know if you can get the view of how small that is on the camera, but it's probably 6 by 4. It's not very big. And then this is the male bathroom. So gender separation is a problem in this building in particular. This is the shower area. There's no separate showers for women. This is what they have for that space. This is where the officer in charge stays. So they don't have so typically in a modern building, they would have an office where they can meet with their staff and sit down and go over things,
privately.
private, and train and provide counsel. And they don't have that. So this is their area, this is their personal area and their office area all in
I
one.
didn't notice.
Yeah, it's all, they have to do it all in here.
Everything.
Yeah, so it's all in here. So that's a struggle. And typically they would have a separate office from this area.
So it's like using their bedroom kind of.
Right, and then one thing that they do is there's no independent space, so there's 4 captains who use this typically, but they all share the same space. So there's no independent space. So it's always, they're on top of each other and who has what, and they gotta clean everything up and take it home and bring it back, and there's no independent space for them. This is our EMS equipment. So this is the cleanest place we can get to put our equipment that actually goes on people for our ambulances, whether it be oxygen masks, Band-Aids, bandages. This is where it all is, and we store them in these lockers to try to find a place to keep it all and do our best we can to organize it. But it's not enough space. You know, you can see we're spilling out. We've got things on top of everything. And on top of that, our fire alarm system's in the same room, our copier's in the same room, and then the only bathroom that we could separate for our female firefighter is right here. So there's no real, people are coming in this area right outside that bathroom. There's no privacy. And so that's the entirety of our cleanest space between the 3 stations to have our EMS equipment is right here. So this is the kitchen. To the firefighters' credit, they took it upon themselves to source donations and things in the past to get cabinets to upgrade it. It was done a while ago. They did a good job, but even that has become dated, and you can see that it's starting to wear. And they live here. This is their home, sometimes more than their real home, and they do their best to keep it something like you would want to have at home. But it's a struggle. It gets a lot of use. It's 24/7. There are always people in it. You know, it's in and out. It's a constant rotation of people. So one thing that Easton Fire doesn't have in any facility is a training room, conference room. We have no place to have meetings. If I wanted to bring a few people in to have a meeting, I have no space in any of the stations. This is the culmination of any place we could go to bring anybody. So if we had to have a department training, this would be the only space, and we can't fit all of our firefighters in here. This is the space they go. If they have any downtime, they could come in here. They could sit there and study and do training. But this is it. This is the biggest common room we have, and it does about 17 purposes. It calibrates gas meters. We do reports here. It's just not a space that's ideal. You know, if you want to host an outside class where we bring in our mutual aid partners to train with us, this isn't really a training room. So this is a real limitation that we have, is that we just don't have a space to bring people in to train. The only thing we can do now when we have to do training is try to get, if the availability is there at Frothingham Hall or Town Hall or Queesit, or pull the trucks out and do it in the apparatus bay and put chairs out there. And it'd be nice to actually have a real room that we could put our staff in and train them and keep them at the high caliber that they are. And we struggle with that. So we go back this way. Our ladder trucks are so long that we're almost out on the road just to work on them. So we have even when we want to pull them out to work on them, we're already out almost into traffic to do it. So this space, even if it was attempted to say, why don't you reuse it, the front ramp, the ramp if you will, is what we call the front ramp here, where we go out on calls, where we pull the trucks out, just physically isn't long enough, and it's very difficult. So we have some limitations just with our own apron on the front. And I think that wraps up our tour. If there's any questions?
So the same that I asked Chief Boone was, why not make it bigger, make it taller? And I think, you kind of answered that.
The apparatus bay in particular, there's just no footprint left on the land to make it bigger. And then we're limited with the frontage out to the street here, the distance we have, the setback. I don't know if there's anything else I'm missing there.
So I guess maybe you can speak to what would a new facility look like, for police and fire, like I said.
Sure. So obviously we've talked about a lot of the big limitations for the departments in this building. A new public safety building would have, as Chief said, a much larger apparatus bay to accommodate the engines that are the apparatus that you have now, as well as those in the future, as the industry changes, as firefighting techniques change, so does the equipment. The advent of more electric vehicles will inevitably have a change in apparatus for the department that they've already started to see. And we really don't know everything that the future holds, but we know that the department over the last 50 years has certainly changed drastically, and we would expect that to happen in the next 50 years. So making a building that accommodates that in both the police and fire is important. Making sure they have the flexibility they need to accommodate future needs, future challenges, And most importantly, continued training for both departments is a very important part of the project. Easton has an opportunity with that to, potentially couple that with some community access to those areas, which would greatly benefit the town. If you've served on a committee or board in town, you probably know that meeting space is limited in town. Town hall has some, and the schools have some, but an additional meeting space would always benefit local boards, committees, community groups. So having the ability to use those for multifunctional training, for multifunctional events, would also be helpful. I think, you've seen in this building a lot of challenges that are endemic of the era of the building, and a new building addresses a lot of those and makes room for 50 years of continued operation.
And I think, at least for me, one of the big things is the safety. Because I never really thought of that before, but, we ask firefighters to risk their lives. It doesn't seem like storing your gear should be one of those risks. So I think that's another big thing that would happen if you got a new facility.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest things that we get out of a new facility. More room is great, but better safety is more important. And we get a better level of safety with our firefighting gear, with our equipment, our ability to work on our equipment. I mean, that's paramount, so we have to do. That's the very first thing. And then, yes, having another storage room would be fabulous. But, getting the firefighters safer is always my first goal.
And what about, there are 2 other stations in town. Can you make those bigger? Can you make, I don't know.
So we're looking at some different models on how to run around a new project. I think that our Bay Road station has the potential for some renovation to help us in a system and see kind of where we end up. And then our Depot Street facility, which is our Station 2, may see its life as another use within our organization. You're on the CERT team, and the CERT team doesn't really have a home. They need space. And being able to free up something as nice as Depot Street to provide emergency response for CERT and other types of things that we do in the fire service. So we won't lose the capability of that building. We might just use it differently. Okay. So whether we keep Bay Road or not as far as operations, we'll see. And that's part of why we have Greg here to tell us what's best for the town.
So really expanding those doesn't solve the problem, or you can't even do
so even
that.
geographically, let's say we were geographically just going to say, well, we'll keep Bay Road and Depot Street only. Geographically, we're not situated to cover the town safely with just those 2 stations. They'd have to be in different places to make it work.
Okay. So if people have questions or want more information about what we've talked about, where do they go to find that?
The information that's been done to date is all hosted on the town's website, so easton.ma.us, and it's on the Municipal Building Committee's website. All of the presentations that we've done, all of the existing documentation that the town's done since 2014 with the municipal study is all posted there, easily accessible and available to the public.
Okay, thank you.